Shaun, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. Just a bit of an intro to yourself, for the people who don't know you. How would you describe yourself?
Day job wise, I'm an accountant and insolvency practitioner. That's quite a broad sort of role. So largely advising businesses who have got financial issues. I guess that goes from the obvious sort of insolvency and administrations and stuff down to just handhold and some director's duties, refinance, and just being there's a bit of a sounding board sometimes. But yeah, so largely an advisory role for businesses.
Then over the day job and kind of, I was going to call it your weekend job, but obviously the conversation we've had of games during the week and weekend. Can you tell people about kind of what you do on a weekend, most weekends anyway?
Yeah, so I'm a football referee, assistant referee, predominantly in the Championship. So travelling length and breadth for the country. Saturdays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, pretty much every day of the week you can find Championship football on now. So yeah, all over the shop, trying to manage work in amongst that, particularly with the midweek games, is sometimes challenging. Particularly occasion last season I went to Swansea on a Tuesday night and had a 9 a.m. meeting in Newcastle the next morning, so pretty much drove back through the night and drank a lot of coffee that day. But yeah, assistant referee, done a few Premier League games, some League 1, League 2 games, usual cup games, but predominantly on the Championship.
I did a little bit of digging because, again, being a true accountant, against stats is kind of my thing. So I think you've been a little bit modest. What I could say, you've officiated over 450 professional games, 339 in the Championship over a 13-year career to date. Obviously, you're still going strong. And biggest game you've done?
I have a League 1 playoff final at Wembley on the line. I've been looking to do that twice, and I've been looking to do a few Premier League games as well. So they weren't far from the biggest Premier League games in the world, but in terms of profile and the worldwide stage of the Premier League, that was first one was Leeds versus West Brom, and they were both in the Premier League. So one of them too for different reasons.
Obviously, taking back to your start of your kind of officiating career. How did you get into it? Because obviously it's not the natural thing to do. When did that start, and when did you kind of catch the bug?
Yeah, so start when I was 14. Wasn't a naturally gifted footballer, I think it's fair to say. But always been in and around football. My dad had played football up to like over 40s when he stopped. My brother plays football. So Saturdays and Sundays our house was either going to watch Sunderland or football or sort of my dad and my brother playing. One weekend, the team I think it was my brother was playing, they had the bare 11, and so they had no one to run the line on the far side. So for some reason I said, I'll go across and do it. And just got chatting to the ref after the game, sort of about how he got into it and what he does. And he said, why don't you do the course? So he gave us a contact for the person who run the course at the FA at the time. And it was more of an interest, really. I hadn't really put that much thought into it and just thought I'd give it a go. The first few years were just spent doing small-sided football, sort of 6-year-olds, that sort of very young, 5 or 6 aside. Saturday morning, my dad used to pick us up. We used to go and watch Sunderland if they were at home. So it was almost a good way of avoiding doing a paper round to start off with. Never intended didn't start with a dream of a referee at any sort of level. It just gradually got more serious and got the bug for it. I was quite lucky when I was sort of 16, 17, and still obviously really young at that age for sort of just starting doing men's football. I was on the line in an Northern League game, and the referee didn't turn up, and the other assistant wasn't keen at all to referee it, so we managed to get someone from the crowd or whatever to do the other line. I refereed it, and I think that really helped give us confidence. There was a few people there from the FA and that type of thing watching just because their local club or whatever. And I think that really sort of helped propel us through the steps, give us that confidence. And my first few sort of promotions went really quick. So the next season I was then refereeing on the Northern League, which normally would have took a couple of years.
Yeah.
So a little bit of just being in the right place, right time, and having the opportunities and taking it, and sort of being recognised to get them first few steps up the ladder.
How old were you when you did your first professional game?
I got in the Football League when I was about 21, 13 years now. Yeah. So really lucky to have done an awful lot of games at that level and seen a lot of grounds, a lot of sportsmen, some amazing goals, and that goes with it.
And I'm guessing, obviously, 21-year-old, looking back, I think when I was 21-year-old, the thought of standing in front of thousands of football fans making key decisions, how did you feel? Was that something that you kind of just accepted and got on with because of the training, or Was it a bit daunting at the time?
I guess because you come through the system, you naturally sort of grow with the crowds and the size of the game. So, but yeah, I think your first sort of professional game certainly daunting in terms of if feeling that it feels a big step up because it's the Football League. It's one of the oldest leagues in the world, really well watched. It was a Bradford City, so a big crowd in that day because they do get big crowds. I think League Two at the time. But I always say, I think refereeing gives you a lot of life experiences, and one of my friends was saying they were talking to their son about doing the refereeing course, and I said even if they don't do it forever or even don't want to get to any level, it's a bit of pocket money and it'll give them a lot of life skills in terms of dealing with people, management, even just being organised and doing your match reports and sort of turning up on time and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's given me a lot in terms of what's then being useful for work and just personal life in terms of life experience that sort of comes with it.
Obviously, you're currently an assistant referee rather than a referee kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
Is that something you made a conscious choice to do? And I'm guessing very different skills?
So it used to be you always promote as a referee. And then as you got promoted to referee, you then lined on the level above what you refereed. But that we were the only country really in the world who did that. Most other countries had specialist roles. So when we brought in, I had the choice. Do I continue as a championship assistant referee or do I continue refereeing where I was refereeing at the time, which was Conference North? For me at the time, while I may have gone on to progress in the referee, I just felt that I had the most opportunity and I was already there on the championship. In terms of skills, yeah, they are quite different skills. And I think the refereeing role obviously is still decision making, but it's more about people management and event management and sort of dealing. Everything comes back to the referee when you arrive. There's an issue, there's weather, there's the team bus is late, everything comes back to the referee. So I think when I was given that decision at quite a young age, I probably hadn't developed a lot of them skills that would allow us to progress as potentially as I wanted to. I think if I was given the decision now, I might have made a slightly different decision, just being a bit older. But yeah, I think it's just purely because I was already on the championship as opposed to continue on the conference.
And I'm guessing you turn up to a championship game. It's a bit like sport. You want to play at the highest level, and then the opportunity to drop back down where the crowds will be smaller, the activity will be bigger, where the championship will be 20, 30,000 compared to that. So I'm guessing that was a part of the decision-making process as well.
Absolutely. I enjoyed refereeing. You obviously get a buzz even refereeing at sort of that level, but it's a different buzz, crowd, the occasion, everything that goes with sort of turning up at that level of football, really. Because of that, I probably looked more forward to being on the line than I did referee, because you'd referee one week, be on the line the other week type of thing. So it just sort of naturally made sense at that point in time that I went down that route.
Think about different challenges you've had in your career. What would you think was the single biggest challenge you've had on the football field, and how did you overcome it?
I was on the line at Blythe Spartans. It was a quarter final, I think, of the FA Trophy. And it was a season. So that season was me. I could have got promoted to the Football League if it had gone well. I got this game, so it was an indication it was going quite well. And there's a handball on the line that both me and the referee missed. Can't really explain why it was missed. When you look back at the footage, it's as clear as day. And it was the first time I'd had sort of a high profile error, which because of it was on film and it was comical really that it had been missed because it was so obvious that it was actually a lot of people had seen it. So when you were going around the refereeing circuit, a lot of people were talking about it, and that knocked me quite a bit in terms of confidence and just sort of questioning your ability. And looking back, that gave me the foundations for resilience and being able to have, because you're always going to make mistakes. So in a game that naturally we're going to get things wrong, and I think having that early and it affected me for a while, just in terms of dealing with it and moving on from it, and I guess taking the learning from it and developing. I think that was probably quite important, and just building that resilience, because again, I'd only been probably 19 or 20.
So how long did you think, looking back now, it took you really to get kind of confidence back up after that?
Probably the rest of that season was towards the end. And I ultimately didn't get promoted. Obviously, was once off on the back of that era. It was then very unlikely anyway. So it was almost get that season out the way, given that I wasn't get promoted, and then sort of give myself a shake and go again the next season. I then got promoted at the end of that season, on the following season on the Football League. But it's not something that I guess you can plan or prep for until it happens. And I'd probably made it bigger in my head than it was, in terms of I thought that people are going to think that I'm sort of never going to be able to sort of officiate at any real level. It's such an obvious mistake. In my head, I guess at the time, I think it was going to impact me for much longer than it really was, where actually most people talk about it for a while, and then something else happens, and you move on.
Yeah.
So I think it was quite important for me to develop the skill set to be able to cope with that, particularly when you were then going on to sort of professional football and bigger occasions.
And presumably, kind of that resilience, that life lesson, that stood you well kind of in the day job?
I think so. I think there's a lot of crossover in terms of decision making and potentially being unpopular. I often say I think I must just like doing unpopular jobs, referee and insolvency practitioner. But yeah, I think the sort of having to accept that sometimes you're going to be unpopular, but you've got a job to do and making a decision. I think no matter whether it be work or in football, you're there to do a job, and ultimately you're not going to get it right all the time, but you've got to take the information you've got and come to the best outcome, the best decision you can in the time that's afforded. And I guess that's, it's no different to work or football.
On the sports field, and football in particular, we talk a lot about high performance teams, and the reference to that is quite often the 11 versus 11.
Yeah.
In terms of kind of the team that you operate with, there's obviously the team on the day, but how does the team environment work kind of with the larger pool of officials?
I generally work with sort of one or two referees, so it's not like you're working with everybody sort of across the season, but there will be times when you work with someone you don't work very often. And what the organisation try to do is sort of share sort of discussion and sort of what the expected outcome and how they want us to approach. I guess the philosophy of how we want to officiate games in England is really drummed down all the time in terms of what they shared. So while you might be working for a different referee, I think we all have a similar mindset in terms of what's expected around decision making, but even sort of communication in terms of when you speak, who speaks, and all that kind of stuff. It is quite. We spend a lot of time sort of drilling that down and getting that right.
That's interesting.
I guess if you think there's often a very short time window to have some communication and make a decision, and if everyone talks over everybody at the same time, you just don't get anywhere. We actually had some pilots come in from BA a couple of years ago and talk about their process.
Right. Okay.
In terms of when people talk and sort of, and we looked at what we could take from them to keep that communication as brief but as accurate as possible to get the information across to the referee or whatever, which way around it is.
I think the communication point is really interesting, that there is key data that needs to be pushed over, but you can't have a 5-minute conflab on it. So it needs to be short, sharp, decisive information passed in a certain manner, and that the fact that there's a protocol of who speaks and when, and probably the use of language is really, really fascinating. It's probably not as extreme, but probably on the day job when you've got big decisions to be made, having that experience must become useful.
I guess it's understanding how sometimes certain phrases and how you put something across can be perceived by different people as well. The work we did through football was on tone and that kind of thing as well. So from the day job, yeah, absolutely. When you're in meetings and you're trying to deliver a message, sometimes just having that little bit extra training in terms of that delivery or understanding how different people perceive things can certainly help. Yeah,
you live in a world where I'm guessing criticism comes as part of the day and night job.
Absolutely,
and the weekend job. How difficult is that to keep going, to make the right decision all the time when there's pressure of a crowd and people on you? How do you live with that, and how do you keep going on that?
Yeah, I guess it just becomes part of your life a little bit. So it's not something you think about it. I always get asked, like, when the crowd and abuse from players and the crowd, like, how do you deal with that? And to be honest, certainly the crowd, you don't really hear it.
Right, okay.
You know the noise is there, but certainly at sort of championship level, you don't really hear the individual comments. It's much harder lower down where you've got a couple of hundred there and you can actually hear people. So you just, I guess, through experience and through training, you just become not immune to it. That's probably not quite the right word, but you just get used to it and dealing with it. And yes, sometimes it's hard if games haven't gone well and you're under a lot of pressure and you come away thinking there's probably a degree of being disappointed with yourself as much as anything. So you put pressure on yourself because you want to do well, because that brings opportunities, the better games and all that kind of thing. We talk a lot about being in the moment and parking decisions, because if you you've made a decision, whether it's right or wrong. At that point in time, you can't change it. So it's about trying to get out your mind, park it for the moment in time, and so you've got your full focus on the next decision. Because what can happen is if you're still focused on the last decision, the next one, and there's a bit of a spiral effect. So some of that sort of training around sort of mechanisms and realizing there's a time to just focus on what you're doing and getting the best decision as you can, and there's a time later to sit down, review and refine and think about what went well and what could have gone better. But in the moment, that's not the time, and it's about trying to stay focused and just think about the next decision as opposed to thinking about the last one.
Obviously in sport there's a lot of conversation about kind of fear of failure, and that can inhibit sportsmen. I'm guessing the same for you. If you're in that mindset of not wanting to make a mistake, like a footballer or a cricketer, you will make more mistakes.
Absolutely. One of the sports scientists, his big thing is sports psychologist. One of his big things is don't have no fear of failure, and just just sort of go out and don't think about not making mistakes. Because the second, if you go out for your target for the game, I'm not going to get any offside errors in this game type of thing. That's not really something you can necessarily measure yourself and sort of deal with yourself. There's going to be situations where it's going to be very difficult to get right, or there's something strange happens. So it's about focusing on your processes and how you sort of you approach things, as opposed to focusing on individual decisions. And as you say, the more you think about the errors, there tends to be more that come.
Is that the same in the day job? Do you take that professional approach into that, or is the slight subtle changes?
In football, we talk a lot about processes and having a process of how we get to a decision, and not just sort of jumping in 2 feet and sort of hoping for the best. And when we review things and sort of critique performance, we spend more time focusing on the process of how we got there, and the communication and the movement, everything that goes with that, rather than the outcome. Because the outcome's the outcome, where if you change your process, you're more likely to get it right next time and every time in the future. If you just focus on the outcome, you're not really thinking about what truly went wrong. And from a work point of view, a lot of what we do is very process driven in terms of the legal process, internal processes, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities, obviously very different in terms of the decision making, but it's about going through a proper thought process to come to an outcome which you can logically explain, because the steps gone behind it, and there's a reasoning behind where you've got to.
Yeah. And again, justifying that reasoning helps with that communication piece with people who feel a little unjust.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
In terms of obviously links between sport and business, what do you think sport could teach business, and what could business teach sport about dealing with pressure?
I think what sport's good at is always having innovation, always having a plan, a thought, a target, and really thinking about what they want to achieve, and having a clear stepped approach, if you like, in terms of how they're going to do that. Be that an athlete or whatever that is, they've got a very clear timetable. They know when the competition's coming, they know what they want to achieve in that competition. It's then working backwards to put a plan in place, have the resource around them, have the people that they need around them, the money, the nutrition, or whatever that will be. And I think a lot of people we see in business haven't put that much thought process and sort of into what they've done. They've jumped in, they've had an idea, but they've not really thought about how they're going to resource it and the long-term plan and the steps they need to get there. And I guess entrepreneurs are always going to have a degree of needing to be sort of jumping into things and find opportunities and sort of driving them. But if they're not doing that, I think they need someone in the team who is the deep thinker, who can sort of strategize and really drive it forward. A lot of people don't see it. So a lot of people...
It is the unseen, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll see an athlete turn up, they'll do what they do, win a world record or whatever it is, and then the people just think, well, they've just got out of bed that day, they've done it, and they've gone, that's them done. But they don't see the huge amount of work that goes on behind the scenes over a number of years and progression to get there. So I think that's probably one thing. I think is just really sort of that detail of really using innovation and properly strategizing and of what they want to achieve.
If you had one piece of advice for a North East business leader at this moment in time, based on your experiences, the kind of what you do on a weekend officiating and the day job, what would it be?
I think it would be don't be afraid to ask for help and reach out to people and talk to people. There's a lot of experience and knowledgeable people out there, and the vast majority of people want to help. And just not being afraid to speak up and saying, this is what I'm doing, it's not going well, or it's going well, or how could it go better? And building that network out based on not trying to sort of do everything yourself, and just take advice from people who's been there, or business people in senior business who have achieved something and are not necessarily in the day job anymore, but they're still out there and they want to offer advice and want to help. I think people sometimes try to just bundle on for themselves when actually they could probably do a lot more and a lot better just by saying, can you help me? Can you point me in the right direction? And if you've got any advice?
Yeah, no, I think it's a brilliant piece of advice, because again, business owners and entrepreneurs are very passionate about what they do, and at times they keep going down that blind alley, and it's opening that community up and having the ability to speak. So I think it's hugely important. I think a very useful bit of advice.
Thank you.
Excellent, Shaun. Thank you very much for that.
Good stuff.